Hey, what's going on, angling addicts? Welcome to another episode. We thank you for tuning in. Guys, before we start, I hope every one of you guys have subscribed to our channel. We really appreciate you supporting our channel. So what we are going to do today is a tutorial. Well, it's a multi-part tutorial. This is part number one, right? And we're going to have several parts. And what we're going to be focusing on is a series on how to set up your rig for surf fishing, right? We've had a lot of questions from viewers and people who want to know how we set up our rig for surf fishing. So we thought we'll just take it, break it down into several different short episodes, and take you guys from through the whole process step by step. Okay. All right, guys. So the first thing we're going to talk about is setting up your leader line. And we're going to talk a bit about why we need a leader and why it's important when you're surf fishing. So most of you all know that we almost fish exclusively with braided line, and braided line is made out of it's something similar to like a cloth fabric. It has different weaves, different companies have different ways of manufacturing it, but basically it's very thin in diameter, but it's very strong, but it's also very susceptible to getting cut off on rocks and reefs and heavy structure and things like that. So generally you would have your main line coming off the reel, going through your guides, and then towards the end of your main line, what you do is you tie a leader. So basically you have your main line. Right? I mean, I've cut this off, but you can imagine the main line coming through, the rod, and you would have it tied on to your leader, and generally you would have the leader, say at least 3 to 4 feet, and it'll go onto a swivel, and then you would have your hook line right at the end of it, right there. Okay. So what this is going to do is when you're fishing, and you have a fish at the end of your line, and that fish is going to be running around, trying to do all sorts of things to get off, right? One of the things it's going to try and do is it's going to try and rub your line on all the structure along the way. So if you just had your braided line connected straight to your swivel here, right, and then your hook, what's going to happen is this part of your line is the area that's going to come into contact with all the rocks, and you're going to get cut off, right? So you want to reduce the chance of getting broken off. So that's why we use a leader. So what you do is you have about a 3 or 4 foot section of your leader, and then you have your hook line. So what happens is when this comes into contact with all the rocks and the structure, you are much less likely to get broken off, and you have a higher chance of landing the fish. Okay, so another reason that we use a leader is because when you are surf casting, you're generally using 10, 11, 12 foot rods, and when you are casting really hard, there's a huge amount of strain put on this braided line, right? And we generally use 15 to 20 pound main braided line. So sometimes the strain or the force generated by your cast can snap this line, because the braided line has zero stretch. See, there's no stretch. So what you want to do is you want to have a sufficient length of leader on there, so that when you're casting, your leader line has a little bit of stretch. So what that does is it helps your whole rig to absorb the shock by stretching a little bit during that cast, and you are a lot less likely to get break-offs and things like that. So that's another huge advantage. So actually some people call it a shock leader also, and that's exactly for that reason, because it absorbs the shock when you cast. When it comes to choosing your leader material, as I mentioned earlier, you have two choices. One of them is regular monofilament line, and the other is fluorocarbon line. Regular monofilament line is half the price. But really, there is no hard and fast rule. You can use either or. It's really up to you. If you're on a budget and you don't want to spend a lot of money on expensive leaders, that's fine. You can use any good brand of monofilament, and that will do. That will work just fine. Some people like to use fluorocarbon line because the manufacturers claim that the fluorocarbon line has more abrasion resistance. It also has a little less stretch that gives you a little more feel when you're fishing, when the fish are biting or you want to feel the bottom. It has more feedback to your hands. But really, guys, it's up to you what you want to use. Choose within your budget. Go with whatever you're comfortable with. It's really the thickness of the leader that really makes the biggest difference, because when it comes to abrasion resistance, the biggest factor that plays a role is the thickness of the material. So the thicker the line is, the more aggressive it is. I mean, it's more resistant to cutting you have. So it's really up to you whether you want to use mono or whether you want to use fluoro. Me personally, I've used both. Sometimes when I run out of fluoro, I use mono, and really there is no difference. I think it's more of a mental thing for me. I like to use this Andy fluorocarbon line. It's called they call it leader material. And really this is like, you can see the price here, actually it's like only $7.99. So it's like really affordable, and it's extremely strong. So this is my preferred brand for leaders, and sometimes when I run out of this stuff in a rush, I will use monofilament line too. So that's really up to you guys what you want to do with that. The thickness or the breaking strength of your leader is really up to you. It depends on what kind of structure you're fishing, what kind of area you're fishing. Generally for me, I like to stick to something like a 60-pound leader, but if I know that I'll be fishing an area where there is a lot of underwater structure, a lot of reefs or corals and things like that, I'll step it up to like an 80-pound or even use 100-pound, because it's thicker and there's less chance of it getting cut off on any sharp objects or rocks and things like that. So really, that's another thing that you guys can experiment and really go with something that you're comfortable with. Also remember that the thicker the leader gets, it becomes harder to tie knots with it. So that also plays a role in the thickness that you would use, because sometimes the regular knots that you use, you can't use because the line is just too thick. You can't get the knots to cinch down well. So I would say anything, if you want a good starting point, you can start at about 50 to 60-pound leader material, and if you feel like you need more, then yes, work yourself up little by little and see how it goes. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to talk about the leader is the length of the leader, right? Because this is the area of your line that comes into contact with all the rocks and coral and all that underwater structure. So you want to typically have a decent length of leader. So generally I like to have about a 4-foot to a 5-foot leader. That would be the point. That would be from where your braided line connects to the leader up to the point where it goes up to the swivel here. So if I'm fishing like a 10-foot rod or 11-foot rod, then I have enough height also, so I tend to keep the leader a little longer because that gives me an extra safety margin. So a good place to start is about 4 foot. I would say that's a minimum that I would use personally. But on average, I would have anything from 4 to 6 feet in length for the leader. So again, that's something that you guys will need to experiment. Remember that the longer the leader becomes, also it becomes harder to cast, because we generally use a uni-to-uni knot here. It's not the best knot for tying your braided line onto the leader, but I use it simply because the uni-to-uni, I can tie that thing with my eyes closed. Even if I'm in the dark, if I'm on some rock ledge getting pounded by waves, this is a knot that I can tie in like 2 minutes flat. It's not the best knot out there. I mean, definitely something like an FG or something like that. An FG knot is far superior, but it also requires more space to do it. You need more time, and you need like a comfortable place to sit down and tie your FG knot. And sometimes when you're hanging off a side of a cliff and you have like this much of space to stand on and do whatever you're doing, you don't have that comfort of space and convenience. So the uni I've found is an easy knot. It's strong enough. It's not, if tied properly, it's not going to break on you. I've never had it break on me, but definitely when it comes to knot strength, there are stronger knots out there, and if that's something, if those knots are something that you want to try out, no problem. Go with whatever you're comfortable with. And also you have to remember that, sometimes when you're surf fishing, when the fish start biting, sometimes your window of opportunity for catching the fish could be literally 15 minutes or 20 minutes, like very short time that the fish are biting. And you don't want to be sitting there tying knots half the time when you can be out there fishing, right? So you need a rig that you can set up quickly and effectively so that you can try to land as many fish as possible. So yeah, that's basically the reason that I like to go with uni to uni, but you guys, can go with any knot that you guys want to try out and whatever you're comfortable with. Okay guys, so that brings us to the conclusion of our first installment of this series on how to set up your rig for surf fishing. I really hope that you guys found this information useful. Please guys, once again, we thank you for your support. Thank you for watching this video. Please like it and don't forget to subscribe, because we have more videos coming up, more installments, and by the end of all these installments you will know how to set up your line and leader and your rig for surf fishing. So that's the whole point of this series. Thanks guys, thank you once again. See you guys on the next episode.